Welcome to Banter on Bikes with your host Zabs
and your co-host Sof. We cover a range of interesting topics, all through the lens of a Muslim cyclist.
every Saturday and Sunday, 5:30 to 6 p.m. on Ramadan FM.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone.
So, how are you? You all right?
Very well, thank you. How are you, Zabs?
Okay, good. Welcome to all our guests joining us today on Banter on Bikes. Yesterday, we had quite an enjoyable conversation. We talked about many things related to cycling and specific, more kind of getting into cycling for the first time. So I think today we had an interesting caller yesterday. It was a chap called Andy who kind of made us think about when he asked us about, what did he ask about?
I think he was asking about when's the best time to cycle during Ramadan. And I guess we were thinking that's a very good topic to expand on a bit more, and just generally cycling and exercising during Ramadan. So yeah, I guess Zabs, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, so I think when we think about cycling during Ramadan, I mean, for me, just from experience, last year I actually didn't do any cycling during Ramadan, and I know that coming out of Ramadan, having to cycle with you and some others who had made some serious gains during that month, I really felt it, especially on the first few rides back. So I think this year, I said to myself,
and what he means is he got left behind. That's what happened.
Well,
he got left behind on the ride.
You could say that, yeah. I mean, I did struggle. I mean, I struggled. I think in the pace was just too hot for me, and I think that was because being out. So I think the key is being consistent and getting back on it. So our caller yesterday, he mentioned specific times that would be best to ride. So from your perspective, what do you think would be the best time?
As I was saying yesterday, for me personally, what I find is, when you start off, I think you've got to take it slow, right? And I think cycling or exercising just before iftar, it's a great time, right? So temperature kind of drops. Obviously you're looking forward to iftar. Just to kind of get it out in that hour. I think is great because one is you're not pressing yourself too hard. Two is you've got iftar to look forward to. So worst comes to worst, you feel like you push yourself too hard. Then
Did you find are you noticing any benefits in terms of like fat burning? Because they talk about the whole fat burning element being quite strong at that moment. I don't know whether you go into a state of ketosis, right?
Ketosis, yeah. Alhamdulillah, I think, and for me, I think at that time, because you've obviously gone the entire day, fasting. Your body's gone into that kind of state. That's where you're going to get significant kind of gains because your body's burning fat already. You then throw on some exercise. And look, it doesn't have to be cycling, right? Whatever people are comfortable, right? Could be walking, light jog, etc. But I think the key thing is, if you are looking for kind of, weight loss and getting into the right kind of frame of mind during Ramadan, then certainly that time, that kind of magic hour just before iftar, I think, works for me. That's very good.
But in terms of ride times as well, so I think going on to that, I think is exactly that is the right point. In terms of time, so certain times of the day may be more suited to others, but also I think maybe ride intensity is also a factor into things. So if you're someone who wants to vary your workouts or is more into more structured training, more into development and improvement, then you might want to have more high intensity workouts. But those are the type of workouts we would probably suggest not to do pre-iftar.
Absolutely.
As that's probably a no-go. So I would say maybe those ones should be done when you're fully replenished after iftar, late at night, after obviously you've fulfilled all your commitments, where you can have a high intensity workout. But again, I would even taper that or tone it down a little bit more than what you would normally do outside of Ramadan, just so you're not completely making it extremely difficult for yourself, because I think the whole day you're fasting, your body is depleted, and to over exert yourself more than normal would, I don't think, would be advisable, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we've all been there and done that, right? Where we've tried to kind of push ourselves a bit too hard, and then you end up paying for it. You pay for it later.
I remember there was a time where I came back after injury. I don't know if you remember this, but we did a 50-mile ride, and this was after being 3 months off the bike. And first 20 miles felt fine. I was like, yeah, this is great, man. I was keeping up with everyone. I was like, yeah, nothing's changed. Then the next 10 miles I was like, okay, this is getting a bit tough. Let me have some more water. Then after that, it just went. I started to I couldn't, there was no power in the legs. I was finding it very difficult. I think it came to a point where I had to have one of the brothers actually like carry me home, literally on his wheel, because I just couldn't manage it. So I think that is another crucial point: knowing your limit, knowing what you're capable of doing. So that does help.
Yeah, and we've all been there when we think we are stronger than we are. We think we want to push it, or we've got certain sort of fitness goals that we're going for. But I think the key thing is, as Zabs has said, you got to know your limits, stick to your limits. As we said yesterday, doing any kind of exercise regime or starting any exercise regime, particularly during Ramadan, you've got to start off slow. Get to know how your body reacts. Don't be a hero like Zabs and try and push it too much.
Be honest, right? You want to be honest.
Be honest. Absolutely.
How many times have we had excuses? I mean, it doesn't come from me, to be honest. I'm not one to give excuses, but we do have people who give the classic excuses. What's it kind of a few of those classic excuses that we've heard from people?
Yeah, and I think especially so Zabs and I are obviously part of a club, so we ride with a number of people, similar kind of ability. And I think the key thing, when you're sort of riding, whether it's during Ramadan or you're riding with others, is clear and honest communication. And because then ultimately the group can stay together, right? Or you just know how everyone's feeling on the day, or if someone's having a particular off day. So we've got one guy in the group who we won't mention any names, right? Because ultimately we don't want any litigation. But there's one guy in the group who is very good at sort of putting on a brave face. Alhamdulillah, he's quite sort of mentally strong like that. But sometimes what you'll see is he's struggling. Part of it could be because he didn't eat enough in the morning, or he had a particularly strong weight session the day before. Squat day, that always seems to come up quite a lot. Loving the squats, but ultimately
I don't think this is just him. I think you've got loads of people who always use the squats. Squats is like a classic one, right? I shouldn't have done the squats day the day before a big ride, right? It's classic.
Yeah.
And
you can
then
see the excuses. You can see the excuses building, because what you'll see as you're riding with people, they're initially they're okay, they're sort of chatting a bit at the first sort of bit of a ride, and then as the ride goes on, they get quieter and quieter. You can see there's a sort of struggle going on, and then you reach out and you say like, "Hey Zabs, are you okay? Are you fine?"
Yeah.
Like, no, fine, but
while they've got like white all over their lips, like they're completely dehydrated, they can't keep up with the pace, and it's like, right, you're okay.
So this is a funny story we should recount for our listeners, right? Well, Ramadan, I fasted ride the other day with one of the brothers.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I think we're riding along, and obviously, I think sometimes people they want to obviously keep up with a certain group. There's a certain tempo, but they may not have been riding for some time. And again, this goes back to being honest with yourself that, are you able to keep up with a certain group or a certain pace? And if you say you are, then obviously you got to deal with the heat. You got to deal with the territory, with what it comes with, right? So obviously, in this particular case, you could see one of the brothers was really struggling, but he had this kind of thing that, no, I'm fine. Like literally, you could see it, but you could see it on his whole body that he was really pushing way harder than he should have been pushing. And so it's, again, being honest and really.
And I think, like you said, his mouth was all white. He was completely
all white, literally, completely dehydrated.
So obviously he was struggling. He should have just come clean, and one of the brothers would have ridden home with him, make sure he was okay. But yeah.
Another thing is going on to that being honest. I think probably communication. Communication is probably really key, and having a solid understanding with people that you ride, because ultimately you're riding together. And it's an enjoyable part. It's part of the brotherhood in essence, right? So obviously you ride together, and especially if you're riding with like-minded Muslim people, then it adds to the joy because you have that common understanding. I think that's what differentiates us. Obviously, seeing it from the lens of a Muslim cyclist, what makes it different from us cycling with a normal club or affiliated club with. A mosque or whatever, it has a different dynamic, but communication is key. I think what do you say about communication? So
no, I'd agree with that 100%. And I think the other thing as well, if you are going to try and exercise with others during Ramadan, and I strongly encourage it, because as you've heard from Zabs and me, one is you have that kind of brotherhood. Two is you have that help. If, you're going to have someone on who's got your back really. So very useful to kind of have that kind of support network. But the other thing I would also say is timing. So one thing that's very, very important, right, if you are going to exercise or you are going to ride, is your routes, you plan your routes, you ride that with others. Again, Zabs and I have been sometimes we've been caught out where it's getting very close to Maghrib, and we've had to kind of stop. Thankfully we've had lights, etc. We've been able to kind of pray at the side of the road. But ideally, what you want to do is you want to get back home, right, and pray at home. So I think the key thing is planning, right? Planning around your routes, where you're going to go. Knowing how long that's going to take you. I wouldn't advise starting a complete new route from scratch. Or new exercise, area you've not been to. So planning, very, very important, really.
But just going back on that communication point, riding with others, I found from experience when you're riding with people, there are certain individuals who may be in the group who tend to voice their opinions or are shouting or trying to communicate when there is no need for communication. As you know, when you're riding and you're riding at a certain pace, sometimes it's very hard to hear what the person behind you is saying. So when you hear someone shouting or someone saying something, you assume there's a level of importance to it. So when you hear something once, you're like, okay, oh, you're right. And then you realize actually he's just shouting because he's shouting.
Just loud.
He's just loud. He's just being fun. And then obviously in that, you end up having miscommunication, as we've seen in the past, where we had a brother who was shouting, who was known for someone who shouts, just maybe as a way of motivating himself. I don't know.
Especially going up any kind of hill, this guy shouts quite a lot.
Oh yeah.
Screaming, with screams. I think. Yeah. You'd be riding along in a group, and all of a sudden you hear this scream behind you. You think, what the hell's going on here? But part of it's motivation, I think, to try and help him get up those hills.
In that, sometimes you have situations where someone's shouting, and you've become so accustomed to it, right? It's like the boy who cried wolf type of story, that you end up not paying attention, and in fact, in those cases, it actually turns out to be quite a serious thing, or they actually have a puncture, or they have some sort of mechanical failure, and no one's ended up stopping for them, right? And it's kind of at your own detriment, right? And we've had that in the past. So talk about puncture stories. I think I don't know if I'm probably the worst in terms of having the most punctures ever recorded in one sitting.
Yeah, that's a funny story. That is a funny story, because I think that's the other point I'd make just before we embarrass Zabs. But having ride buddy, people you ride with, or exercise with, very, very useful, right? Because issues do come up, and if you have someone there, they can help. But funny story with Zabs. I remember we went somewhere. I think it was Richmond Park. Again, a number of us going on, and this is the only guy I've seen to go through sort of like 4 punches in one continuous sort of go. And It was absolutely comical. It was like we started off changing sort of one in a tube, and then second tube got busted. Third in a tube, there's something wrong with the valve that kind of popped out. Fourth in a tube, one of the other brothers comes along with a cycle pump, starts pumping it up, and then realizes
I think that's the last one.
That was the last one broken off the tube, so it was absolutely comical. But I think
we managed to get it. We
got it in the end. We managed to get it in the end. But having sort of people or multiple people there to help made a massive difference.
Yeah, I mean, because if that was the thing is, I actually bought the wrong inner tube for the bike. And it happens, and I mean, this is from experience, right? Like, obviously,
this is preparation, right? This is preparation. You need to be prepared.
And again, I think it goes back to the whole Memon thing of being conducive, trying to buy the cheapest inner tube. I end up buying the wrong type of inner tube, right? And there's me thinking that I've got the right inner tube. You've got all this confidence. Yeah, if anything happens, I've got the right one. And then you realize actually you bought the wrong one, and it's not going to work for your bike anyways. So having preparation, I think. Well, I mean, we've had a situation. I remember when we were riding that someone had a mechanical failure where they were unable to ride, right? And they had to call was it an Uber or something? So
an Uber. Yeah.
So even having something like simple as having an Uber app on your phone, just in case, having a backup plan is always good. And now obviously you've got this whole WhatsApp live location, which is really useful, or any other type of live location situation where someone is able to kind of track you, see where you are. I think those kind of things also are quite helpful.
Yeah, definitely. What's your take on sort of fueling, nutrition? That's why some people might be put off. Okay, look, I'd really like to do something during Ramadan, but you know what? I'm just tired all the time, or struggle. How can I cycle while fasted?
To be honest, I'll be honest. When I first came into cycling, it was all about this whole fat loss, right? Like I want to just lose weight. So it's always thinking that under fueling is the way to go. But in fact, what you realize is that the amount of calories that you burn cycling, fueling is crucial, right? You need to make sure you're fueling your body well, right? And so if you don't know how much calories you're taking in compared to how much calories you're taking out, then maybe it's worth doing a MyFitnessPal, understanding your in and out balance. So you're always in a kind of balance equilibrium in a sense. But, for Ramadan in specific, the suhoor is crucial. And what do you have for suhoor, Saf?
So say, for example, I know I'm going to try and ride that day, then I'll make sure it's a very good suhoor, so high density, foods that, are slow burning. So obviously a big bowl of porridge, I might have some eggs, banana, dates, various things that I know are going to keep me fueled, keep me going. And then obviously, once I've done my ride for iftar, again, good food, right? I know a number of us are obviously very very comfortable with deep fried food, all this sort of stuff. So I try and stay away from that. The samosas, pakoras, etc. Just good, grilled kind of protein, grilled meat, fish, some carbs on the side. But obviously good food, right? Good calorie-rich kind of food. And I found those two things get through.
I found something really interesting this year, actually. Last year I had a real problem. I couldn't get enough calories in, especially like during suhoor, because I felt like I was always bloated. So what I've done this year is to allow me to kind of be able to eat a little bit more relaxed, get a little bit more into my system, is I'll wake up a little bit earlier for suhoor. And that gives me enough time to kind of just pace myself to get that fueling strategy right, without feeling bloated while I'm going back to bed, right? Because I find that it's very difficult because your stomach shrinks. You can't get in as much food at that time. So by starting the process a little bit earlier, you kind of really help that. And the other point, I don't know about hydration. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think ultimately you got to just keep hydrating. And to be honest with you, I think for me the hydration starts from iftar the night before, right?
Yeah.
As soon as you
100%.
Obviously sunnah, use the dates, but I think then literally I'll just keep hydrated, keep drinking, throughout the evening. and just before I'm going to bed. And I think again that's going to keep you going. That's going to keep you going
100%.
through. It means because Zabs, you're absolutely 100% right. If you don't get your fueling strategy right, and during Ramadan, even more important, then you're not going to be able to exercise, right? You're not going to be able to exercise in a fasted state.
It's a high calorie expenditure type of sport that you have to understand it, and that's the way you get you grow in terms of performance, but also just without causing damage, having this whole bonking effect on a ride where you kind of collapse halfway through because you can't maintain it, and fueling is crucial. What about people who are time restricted, who have time management issues? What kind of alternative options do they have? I mean, not everyone has time to maybe go and do a 2-hour ride. Are there other options that people have maybe that they can look at?
Yeah, so I think either cut the ride short is one of them, right? So just do a shorter ride, something local, go out with your kids, etc. If that doesn't work, then obviously not just cycling, you can go for a walk, etc. One thing I found this year very, very useful. Not sure if people can see it behind me, but I actually have an indoor bike now. So I invested in one, and what I found is that just opened up for me, flexibility, right? I didn't have to kind of, I just had the freedom to go at whatever time I wanted, right? Or exercise at whatever time I wanted. Specifically, where during Ramadan, obviously you're kind of time poor at certain times, or you're trying to pack in a lot. Yeah. Obviously the sleep deprivation, but straight after Tarawih, for example, you can kind of jump on, get a bit of exercise going. So that for me, I think made a massive difference.
I agree with you. I think the indoor cycling game, or the indoor cycling element is a game changer. I kind of purchased it at the same time. I think we both went through this kind of phase of like, this weather is just unbelievable. It's raining all the time. We're losing the gains, the whole kind of thing. So I invested into one as well. But unlike you, I put it in my bedroom, which means that I've got some time limits restrictions. So, anything after 11 is like no-go because, you've got the windows open. Wife's just not having that. So
it's quite noisy, I imagine as well.
Or
you are quite noisy.
I'm probably a little bit more noisy, but the indoor trainer is actually not bad, but they all have some sort of noise that comes from them, and at 11 o'clock 12 o'clock at night, I don't think anyone wants to really be hearing that. So I think you're fortunate you've got your setup, or is it in your cabin or something?
Yeah, it's in my cabin, so just useful. So then I obviously don't get any grief from the other half.
Also, I think as it's Ramadan, it's very important that we set a good intention for why we're doing this, right? So ultimately, right, one of the intentions I've come across a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where it says a strong believer is better and more beloved in the sight of Allah than a weak believer. However, there is good in both. Right? So it's quite a beautiful hadith to make a good intention of that. The physical element is an important attribute. Obviously, this month is dedicated primarily to the spiritual element and how you control the body, but ultimately, I think having a good intention is crucial.
Absolutely, and you found this because like last Ramadan, you didn't cycle, you weren't cycling, were you?
No.
But this Ramadan, you've done it, yeah. And how do you feel?
I feel mentally stronger. I feel like the fact that I'm able to overcome a fasted ride doing 20-30 miles, coming back, I feel rejuvenated. It gives me the energy and the mental capacity that I can challenge everything else. But we love cycling, so I think that also
I think we're obsessed. I think we are a bit passionate. We're a bit obsessed, but
it's a good
worse
passion.
Things to be. It's a good passion, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And in terms of obviously, what our viewers have to look forward to actually is that passion that we love about cycling. And we're going to be talking about all sorts of different things, from going into more detail of fueling, or talking about, specific things within cycling, like climbing, and what it takes to climb, and the challenges, the mental side of cycling. Any other kind of things that you think that we're going to bring up? that
Yeah,
our
I
guests
think
will
those are
like?
very useful. I think, but coming back to your point, I think the intention is a good point,
Yeah, it's
because again,
crucial.
people might find it hard to like try and get into it, or start any kind of new exercise regime, but always starts with the intention. Have the good intention, and then
Yeah.
alhamdulillah, everything else will follow really. So I think that's a very
Yeah.
key point. I think
Yeah.
a brief flavor of other topics. Obviously, we talked about nutrition. We can go into that in a bit more detail in future sessions.
Let us
Clothing
know.
is a very
Yeah.
useful one, but obviously message us and let us know if there's specific topics.
Yeah, let's hear the viewer. Let's see what the viewers have to say. It'd be also good to know what they want to hear during this month. We're open to suggestions.
Lovely. All right. Well, thank you everyone. That concludes the show, and we'll speak to you again next week.
Assalamu
Assalamu
alaikum.